There's another one of my favorite posts from you as of recently. You basically gave a list of things that people can do for 30 days to become essentially unrecognizable. I love this post. One of them was get at least 7 hours of sleep.
I haven't been able to do that. Obviously, like right before here,
Well,
my kids are two kids. They're screaming.
2 kids.
Here's Uncle Max. There you go.
In the middle of a book launch, which writing a health book is ironically one of the least healthy things that you could do for yourself.
I would agree with that.
Right? Hit 40 to 50 grams of protein at the first and last meal. Let's talk about like breakfast, breaking the fast, right? What is your take on that?
Well,
there's like this, a lot of people are intermittent. I actually had a conversation about this earlier today. Somebody was like, big intermittent fasting fanatic. He doesn't eat until 2 in the afternoon.
I mean, over time, that's probably not ideal. And here is why I would say that. First, let's talk about the first meal of the day. And actually, that comes from the longevity track in my book. So I have a longevity track in my book, ways in which you need to eat to optimize your body for longevity. All the research, to my knowledge, is based on that first meal of the day. When we talk about protein quality, we talk about leucine stimulating muscle protein synthesis. It is a marker of muscle health. Muscle protein synthesis, that action, that mechanism is what we believe to be a marker for muscle health. That first meal of the day, the body is primed. All of the studies, to my knowledge, are based on that first meal of the day. So we know what happens based on that first meal of the day. You get an increased leucine threshold, you stimulate muscle protein synthesis. There's other mechanisms which we don't have to go into, like EIF4 and these other mechanisms that are elevated over time. We know that you have to hit, it's more ideal to hit 40 to 50 grams at that first meal of the day. Stimulate tissue. There's a couple other things that happen is the evidence supports that you are likely much more satiated. And these are from brain imaging studies, that you are satiated for that next meal. You're much less likely to be driven to eat something else. So that middle meal, believe it or not, is less important from a muscle protein synthesis influence.
Interesting. So nailing your protein intake for the first
meal
and
last meal
are
the most important.
Because your first meal, again, it basically like dictates your hunger.
And you are
for
primed.
The rest of the day.
And you are primed.
And you're primed.
You are totally primed for that responsiveness to amino acids.
Because you'd been fasting.
Right.
For essentially 8, 9, 10 hours.
Yeah, and we know that potentially some of the initiation factors might last 5 hours. Some of the muscle protein synthetic response might last 2, but nobody really knows because no one has studied the middle meal. The question becomes, do you have to have a robust amount of protein in that middle meal? And I would say it depends on for what. Maybe to meet your protein goals, but it's not as critical. Like let's say for you, if you're protein stable and you know that you're getting, 125 grams of protein a day. You're obviously probably getting more than that, but if you're having 50 at that first, 50 at that last, then that 25 gram meal it doesn't really matter what that meal is.
But if you're really trying to optimize for muscle mass accrual, wouldn't you say that it's
4 meals?
It's probably optimal to keep your protein distribution spread evenly throughout the day?
I would say the evidence would not support an even protein distribution. And I was talking to Don about this for a long time. So they did the initial studies. The history of this is it started with protein pulsing in women. And they realized that, so there was they did these meals where they had, I think, 70 grams of dietary protein. Don't quote me on that. It might be 70, it might be 60, where they had one group where they spread it throughout the day. And then they had one group where they had at least one meal with 50 grams. And then the other 2 meals were less. And what they found was that the body composition and muscle retention was different and better in the higher dosed protein, even though the macronutrients were the same. So this is a little bit about this history of what they called protein pulsing in the beginning. Then Doug Patton-Jones and Don Layman started to put together a series of studies where they looked at this protein distribution concept. And Stu Phillips may have been involved in that, but for sure Doug and Don. And they started to do this protein distribution of 30 grams of protein 3 times a day. And what they found was that did it improve body composition? It did, but could they say for sure that they knew that what was happening in that middle meal or the last meal? They didn't. And we still don't know because people don't test that middle or last meal. Big takeaway, which is if you are looking for weight loss, there's calorie control, which is really important. And the other aspect is prioritizing protein. And that's where an even distribution comes into play. I put an even distribution track in the book for weight loss purposes, and then you kind of match where you're going to be at with carbohydrates. The goal is it affects hunger, stabilizes blood sugar. You know, if blood sugar is up and down, then it creates issues with cortisol and just other counter-regulatory hormones. Then the other aspect of that is if you are thinking about hypertrophy, then this is where you would eat 4 meals a day, because now you are stimulating muscle tissue 4 times a day. One thing that we know for sure is that as you age, that 1 meal a day is not ideal.
Right.
The OMAD, the 1 meal a day.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you're just this massive workout human that's stimulating tissue, but over time, 1 meal a day is not going to be adequate. That's the traditional diet, how the traditional diet is set up is it's a little bit of carbohydrates for breakfast, a little bit of maybe a small turkey meal, whatever, sandwich, and then a big steak. That is not ideal for body composition.
The 1 meal, the OMAD.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the fasting, I want to answer your fasting question.
Yeah.
What do you think about fasting?
Well, I don't think well, I'm interested in the research on like early time restricted eating. So I think it makes sense to eat like an earlier dinner and then to not eat too late at night from a circadian biology
That's exactly
standpoint.
my thoughts.
But I'll just tell you like where my thinking on this has evolved. 5 years ago, I probably would have thought that there was no harm to pushing my first meal of the day for as long as possible, with my rationale being, well, I'm probably, oxidizing more fat, I'm keeping my insulin low for longer, I'm spending more time in a low insulin state. And also, of course, as a means of calorie control. But now I feel that in light of all the research showing us how important it is, muscle retention and all that stuff, I think it's really important to get that protein, that big protein bolus, not too long after you wake up.
Yes, I would agree with you.
You want to halt that overnight muscle protein breakdown. You're basically setting up your hunger pattern for the day with that first meal. And also, I like a morning workout. And I've noticed that by fueling my workouts properly with carbohydrates, and I'm not just going to eat carbohydrates by themselves, so I'm going to include protein with
By the way, when I came in, he was eating pancakes under the table. No, I'm just kidding.
I actually did eat pancakes today, but they were protein pancakes.
Fair.
I
would. Well, every time I come here, you guys should know there's no food for me here. Every time.
I mean, you're welcome to raid my pantry.
I do every time.
I got protein. I could have made you a protein shake. I got plenty of those. I got plenty of that lying around. So yeah, what's your read on?
It's actually the exact same.
Yeah,
it's the exact same. So the circadian data would suggest eating earlier on is better and limiting your food later on in the day.
Hey, if you liked that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.